We are going to be covering CSS3. We've already looked at some of the CSS3 commands, but we are going to actually get into some of the animated features in CSS. And I know a lot of you have been looking forward to this, so this should be a fun week. In the lecture demo, I do go a little bit into some background on CSS3. And what you might encounter in older pages, because when it first came out, the web browsers did not recognize it. So you could see code with prefixes in front of the code. And so I did include that because older pages are going to have that in it. Then we go through some text and object formatting. Some of this is a review. Because these features are pretty cool and I introduced them earlier. You can play with all of these by clicking on the W3 Schools links. We go through some additional features with background graphics that you probably don't know about. The fact that you can layer graphics on top of each other, and how to adjust the size without actually editing the images, how to specify where the image is going to be cropped in relation to the border or padding or content, all of that kind of fun stuff. A couple new things on colors. Alpha was added, so you can kind of see how that works. Also, how to create gradients. And they have linear and radial gradients. So linear is kind of a line gradient, and radial is a circle that transitions into another one. And then how to apply shadows to text, to boxes, that type of thing. This should be review because we have used it before. Some of the new text features, and I did try to incorporate some of the interactive features here so you can kind of see the code and what it does. Some of you were interested in web fonts, and that is now included as well, and you will be using them in the textbook assignment. And then we get into 2D transformations and 3D transformations. So with the 2D, most of them use transform, use that property followed by what it is that you are going to change. So we basically go through all of the different properties and the values you can use. And basically, origin is the center point. So if you rotate, it affects where it rotates from. So right now it's 50-50. So if we rotate, you'll notice it kind of stays here. But if I change the settings and then I rotate, I've just changed the origin point of where it's rotating from. So that's like a little interactive thing. And if you mess it up, just reload the page and it'll be fine. And most of these transformations, as I mentioned, you do have to use the transform property, followed by the type of transformation you want to apply and its values. So for transform, you can use translate, and that actually moves objects. Scale makes them bigger or smaller. Rotate, as you saw, makes them go around in a circle. Skew and perspective are a little harder to understand what they look like. So I've got examples here of rotate, translate. This is what skew looks like. A lot of times something will be skewed if you're trying to create a shadow effect, that kind of thing. I also have a bunch of interactive links here. And perspective is a little different as well. My best description would be if you are on a road and you look off in the distance, how it looks like it's much narrower in the distance. That is perspective. Okay, and so there is a command where you can do that with your objects. And we get into 3D transformations and we talk about perspective. And I do have some links to some examples. So this has got a perspective of 200. And you can see what happens as you change the perspective. So you can basically see what the different settings do. And here you can set the X and Y values of the perspective origin, which would be your starting point. So here it's 50-50. And if I click outside the box, you can see what happens if I do an X of 10 and a Y of 50. And now if I do an X of 10 and a Y of 100. Okay, so you can kind of see how that adjusts the perspective. So you can kind of play around with that with values to see what they do. And then for 3D, you basically have the same types of animation that you do for 2D, but you'll notice that there's an additional setting of Z, okay? And that's a depth setting. So you can still scale, you can still use translate, which moves it around, but not only can you move it on the X and Y axis, you can also move it on a Z axis, which is depth. And then you have rotate as well. And here's another little interactive example. So if you wanted to play around with scale, translate, or rotation, you can. And with scale, okay, 1 is like 100%, 1.25 is making it 25% bigger, 1.50, you're making it 50%. Okay, and so that's all scale, and then you can adjust rotation and translation would be the position. Okay, and you just basically click outside the box and it'll apply it. Transitions come into play when you are going from one style to another. And so you basically have transition, what it is that you are changing and how long you want basically that transitional change to happen. So if you are adjusting the width, if you want it to last a certain number of seconds, you can specify that. Here I've got a little div tag with original, the width is 100 pixels. I'm going to bump it up to 300. And you can see here, I'm transitioning width in 2 seconds. So how that looks. Okay, and it only applies when I'm hovering. So when I remove the hover, it goes back to its original size. Okay, and the reason it only applies when it's hovering is because I changed the width on div hover. Here's another one that changes on the hover. It's going to rotate. And so let me see. When I hover, it rotates. And then when I'm not hovering, it goes back. Okay, and then this just shows more than one transition being applied. So this is kind of a shortcut for coding. You can do the longer method and do transition property and duration separately. In your assignment, I have you do it both ways, so you're familiar with it. Okay, so just kind of read through these, become familiar with it. Use the interactive examples because they will help you understand it. And then we get into animation. Animation does use a keyframe property, and you can either do a from and to, or what I normally do is I use a percentage. And you can go from 0 to 100%, and the steps are up to you. If I wanted to have 100 different animations, I could have 1%, 2%, 3%. People don't normally do that, but you will be using this quite a bit in the textbook and lab assignment. because it's kind of a nifty way of animating things. And you can literally animate anything. You can animate shadow, text shadow, color, size, position, pretty much anything you want can be animated. So you set up a keyframe, you give the animation a name, and then you have to connect that animation name with an element. Okay, so here's the keyframes. The name is my first, and here is how I'm connecting it to this div element. Okay, so you set up the keyframes and then you have to make the connection. And you will be practicing that quite a bit in the assignment. And so read through all of that, work through the interactive examples. That'll give you a pretty good understanding of CSS3. And then you're going to come in and do the textbook assignment. And there are videos here for you to watch. There's some files that I'm giving you, and you're just going to kind of focus on the new tasks. And so you're going to take famous quotes. You're going to add a tooltip to that so that when you point at the quote box, you can see a little tooltip display. You're also going to add some animation to the quote boxes that basically they're going to kind of bounce and rock when the page first displays. Then you're going to create a little cube that looks like this. And you're going to actually create a bouncing ball. And this is all the code it takes to create the ball and the shadow. Not a lot of code to create this. You're going to take the song snippet page and you're going to animate the title. You are going to animate the hover on all of the sections. And you're also going to animate the sections that are inside article. You're going to animate those when the page displays so they kind of bounce up and down and rock a little bit. Okay, and once you're done, you're going to end up with 4 files that you're going to have to upload. Then you're going to work on your lab assignment. And for the lab assignment, you're going to take 2 of your own pages, the Flexbox page from Lesson 6 and the form you created in Lesson 8, and you are going to animate them. And the videos kind of show you what to do, and I do have examples here. So the animation you're going to do to your Flexbox is when you point and hover, it's going to rock. And then for the form, that's going to do a little bit more because you are animating the title and the elements in your form. And then when you hover over the buttons, you'll notice that they animate as well. You're also going to play a little bit with resizing text boxes and kind of differentiating between using a background size of contain versus cover. So you're going to end up downloading a page with quite a bit of the code in there. And then you're going to be adding the code here that I have basically bold-faced and highlighted. And then this shows you what your completed page should look like. And once you finish that, your assignment page, you are going to pick something on that page to animate. What you do is totally up to you. And if you want to animate more than one thing, awesome. But I'm just going to require that you animate one thing, and it's your choice what you want to do. And by the time you get to this, you've already animated quite a few things. Okay, so you have lots of examples to work with. Then you're going to update your links, transfer everything to the web, and you're going to enter done in the assignment drop boxes. If you run into any problems or have questions, please ask. I'm hoping that you guys have a lot of fun with this because CSS3 is pretty awesome.